All right, today I want to talk about the reality of sharing a bed with a baby and give you my honest thoughts about co-sleeping 1 year in because yes, we are 1 year in. My baby just turned one. Very sad. And we have been co-sleeping the whole time. So I'm going to go through a little bit about her sleep, like our experience, first time parents, what we see about baby sleep, what her sleep was like, our co-sleeping experience, pros, cons, and then stay tuned to the end because yes, I will answer the burning question I feel like every parent has and I've always been asked, which is how do you have sex if you're co-sleeping? All that, let's get into it. All right, so when it comes to co-sleeping, I was not new to the concept of co-sleeping. I knew the importance of safe bed sharing and the tenets. And if you're new to this and you're like, they're safe, how do you safely bed share? All that stuff. I'm not gonna cover that in this video, but I will link some resources below. There are certain things you want to follow, but whether you plan it co-sleep or not, I highly recommend that you educate yourself on that because what I have found is that even parents that sleep train, even parents that put their kid in the crib, almost always there are instances where you will end up co-sleeping even for a night. Maybe your baby gets sick in the very beginning when they're newborn and they don't want to be put down. So knowing how to safely do it will just make you feel better. And like not like you're doing something wrong, but that you feel fully prepared to do it if it's serving your family best. I had actually planned to co-sleep, particularly in the beginning, and really didn't think much else about it. So a little bit about my daughter's sleep. Let me tell you. When she was a newborn, I think because she was a newborn and newborns love to be held. And if that's news to you, I want you to make sure that you know that it's not weird if you have a newborn and they want to be held all the time. And it's not weird if they don't like to be put down for naps. That's normal. Newborns basically still think that they're in your womb. And so they want to hear mama's heartbeat. They want to smell mama's chest. They want to feel her skin. That's not weird. So all that to say, my baby slept on my chest for the first 4 to 6 weeks of her life exclusively. We have gone through the gamut of sleep things, okay? But between her never wanting to be put down, like at all in the first 6 weeks of life, she did not sleep if she was put down. She only slept on mama's chest, to having split nights, which if you don't know what that is, it's when she wakes up at 2 a.m. and she kind of like wants to party and play for 2 hours. We went through that for a couple months. We went through the 4-month sleep regression, whatever you want to call it. That was gnarly. She basically was up at 2 a.m. but then didn't go back to sleep until 6 for like 6 weeks straight. So all that to say, we have experienced the gamut of like sleep challenges, I think. Teething, now that we've really gone through everything. And so that's a little bit about our picture of sleep, meaning we prioritized what was going to get us the most amount of sleep, which brings me to my pros and cons. Pro number 1, more sleep. Hands down, more sleep. That is the biggest pro of co-sleeping that I've seen in the last year. My baby does not sleep nearly as well when she is not near me, when she cannot nurse. Hands down, it's more sleep for her, it's more sleep for me, and it's more sleep for my husband. Because even if she wasn't in our bed, she would have been in our crib, which was a few feet from the bed, and not in a separate room. So if she woke up, she would still be waking up me, my husband, and I both. And so I prioritize what gets us the most amount of sleep because think about it, especially in the new phases, your baby's nursing a lot throughout the night. Think about how exhausting it is to like get up, go over to the bassinet or like bring them back, nurse them. You have to like, you're awake the whole time you're nursing them. And then you're like having to put them back in the bassinet. But they don't stay asleep in the bassinet because if they're anything like my baby, you try to put them back in the bassinet and then they wake up. Why? Because they want to be held by you. And so you're doing it again, and they're putting them back. Like it's like this whole thing. And you don't end up sleeping. And so there's so many chunks of sleep where you're awake. Whereas when you're co-sleeping, it's not perfect. It's not like she just rolls, nurses, and falls right back asleep. You know, sometimes she squirms, sometimes she kind of wakes up, sometimes she's fussy, whatever. But the amount of like time and chunk of time when I can minimize to just wake up, nurse, go back to sleep is so much shorter, especially now that she's big enough that I don't have to lift her up to nurse. I just roll over, pop the boob out, she nurses, falls right back asleep, I fall right back asleep. It's so much better. The second one, more connection. I don't want to make it seem like if you don't co-sleep, you don't have as much connection, but this is just a personal testimony. What I've observed over the last year is that there's just a lot more connection between my baby and I, particularly though in the newborn phase. It's also healthy for baby because remember, their physiological processes are regulated by mom. And so their body temperature, things like that, they're regulated by mom. Their breathing regulated by, like, they regulate with mama. And so as much as we can, connecting those two is going to be not just sweet, like connection, like, oh, I'm connected to this baby, but like physical connection and regulation. You know, I felt calmer. I feel like I was more regulated when I was able to be close to her, and it was better for her. So, oh, hi, Kevin. I'm talking about sister. So in those early days postpartum, you can have like some of those feelings of like, like you feel like a little bit on a roller coaster. And I always felt better when I was with her very close, especially throughout the night. And I was later able to learn that's because hormonally speaking and physiology speaking, you're actually, baby and mama are regulating each other. And so for me personally, it felt so much better. Next pro, it's amazing for milk supply, amazing for breastfeeding and allowing you to have a strong milk supply established in the beginning and then also keep it. Because remember, a lot of your milk supply is driven by a few factors, but two of the really big ones has to do with removal, particularly at nighttime. Nighttime removal drives daytime supply. I learned that from my lactation consultant. So the removal, as in like nursing or pumping at night, is even more important for your supply than daytime removal. And skin to skin, because when you're co-sleeping, you're naturally going to be skin to skin a lot. You're going to be snuggling, or if they're newborn, they're going to be on your chest. You're going to be touching them way more, just like naturally, for all those hours during the night than when she would be in the crib. Because we did dabble with crib sleeping. Didn't dabble very long, didn't work. It was not great. I got way less sleep. One of my friends saw a decrease in her milk supply when she went back to work just because of distance and all that stuff. And she was not a co-sleeper. And I remember saying, hey, like, why don't you just try for a few nights and see if maybe during the night you can help keep your milk supply up. And it totally helped her. It helped kind of make up for the hours that she was separated from baby at night. Again, this is totally a personal choice. You have to do what's best for family, but I personally have seen nothing but positive factors on that front when it comes to breastfeeding, milk supply. Last pro, which is more of a personal thing, is I just love waking up to her in the morning. It's so cute. Her hair's all askew, and she's like the first thing that I see in my husband and I, and we can all snuggle in the morning. She's not gonna be sleeping in our bed forever, you know? So I just wanted to enjoy the season that we're in, and she's growing so fast. And so for a purely sentimental reason, I just adored waking up next to her. And I still adore waking up next to her. Now, let's talk about the reality of the cons. I'm sure depending on your situation, it's gonna be different, the challenges, but here are things that like I thought of and maybe I faced personally. One that no one talked to me about was that I definitely saw more aches and pains. Already when you're postpartum, you have a lot more relaxin, which is that hormone that literally like relaxes your body and kind of makes your muscles a little bit less stable, which you have during pregnancy. So when you're breastfeeding, that hormone's still present in your body. But because you're breast sleeping, you find yourself in a lot of weird positions. So you find yourself like maybe arching your back like this and falling asleep like that, or like you're kind of sleeping around the baby. And so I had a lot of days where I would wake up and my neck would be tinged, or like my back, a lot of stuff like that I just didn't think about. I didn't anticipate. And it wasn't until I talked to some of the other moms that I knew that co-slept that were like, oh yeah, like, yep, like we experienced that too. But I definitely paid for it certain days when I wake up and my back was like, wow. The next challenge that might be a challenge for you, it was not a big challenge for me, but I do know that this is a hang up from some other moms, is that you do have to alter your sleep space for co-sleeping. So you either have to get like bed rails, or we personally put our mattress on the ground and moved things around. We made sure that nothing in our room was like a danger to her, especially when she started crawling, that she could reach up. And so we altered our sleep space to accommodate baby. There are some people that don't want to do this. They like their bedroom the way that it is. They like their bed. They don't want to have to, or maybe it's a hassle, or maybe there's just like not a safe place for them and they're not willing to like do the things that need to be done, which I totally understand. And so that might be a challenge for you, because you do have to accommodate to the fact that there's a baby sleeping in their bed. And it's not that big of a deal in the first few months for sure, but once they start rolling over, once they start crawling, or even like walking, my baby started walking at 10 months, so it was fairly early, they're mobile. So you really have to think about that if they're gonna be sleeping in that space. Let's talk about the challenge that some people have brought up, and the biggest hurdle I think, which is that some people say, how do you experience intimacy with your spouse if you're co-sleeping? A couple things on that, and I'm just gonna share my experience. This might be more challenging if you don't have an extra space, because the truth is that my husband and I have other rooms in the house that we can be intimate in, that we hang out in. So it's not even just about sex, which we do have other places we can have sex in, but it's also about like intimacy and hanging out. And so if you feel like your space is your couple's space, I understand how that might be a challenge. We can be intimate in anywhere else in the house, and it's not a problem. So I personally have not found that to be an issue, also because I will just say, even if she wasn't sleeping in our bed, she would be sleeping in the crib, which is 2 or 3 feet from our bed, because I personally did not want her in a separate room that young. And so neither did my husband. Talk about getting less sleep. I would have to wake up and go to another room to nurse her and then come back. I would not sleep at all because she still nurses in the night. She's either sleeping in our bed or she's sleeping in a crib a few feet away. The challenge of sex is still present. I mean, I guess there is a difference between the baby being in your bed and the baby being in the crib right there. But to me, it's like they're still right there, you know? So for us, we haven't had an issue with like just having to be intimate, whether that's sexually or emotionally or relationally, or having our alone time in other areas of the house. But that's something to consider. Like if you live in a 1-bedroom apartment that's really small, that might be something, I guess, if you're like, no, I want the barrier between my baby sleeps in the crib and we sleep here. Some people think that co-sleeping, or the question would be, oh, isn't that so interfering with like your connection as a couple? My husband was also very on board with co-sleeping. And so if you and your partner are in disagreement about this, it's something to definitely work through, because you want both of you to be on board for what's best for your entire family. I can just tell you, for me personally, it has not been an issue with connection. It has not been an issue with intimacy. If anything, the closeness that we've all had as a family has really been amazing for my husband and I's marriage. It's been strengthening, it's been nurturing, it's been deepening. We've seen the Lord work in so many incredible ways in that. And that's obviously way more than co-sleeping. That's more of like an attitude to how we've approached our family, which is that we really value closeness, and we really value my husband and I being able to find intimacy and find connection with our kids. I didn't want my husband and I to feel like we had to leave the baby in order to feel connected. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we don't want to go on date nights, or we don't go on date nights, or we don't have time alone at all. But what I mean is, I didn't want it to be I didn't want it to be a prerequisite to us feeling connected. I'm really grateful that I've seen parents do it well, because ultimately we chose not to sleep train. We have sleep like hygiene, right? We have bedtime routines, we have things that we do, but we chose not to do anything that required her to like self-soothe or like self-regulate or anything like that. It's been helpful for me to see families that have like walked where we've walked and be like, yeah, they all eventually sleep in their own bed, and it doesn't need to be a big thing. And you know, this season is so quick. And so for us, hands down, we do plan to do it again. But again, we will reassess just based on what's best for us and the baby at the time. But we've so enjoyed co-sleeping. And so I hope that answered your questions and just gave you like a more realistic picture of what it's like to share your bed with the baby. Because yes, there are pros and cons and challenges. For me personally, reflecting back a year, the sweetness and the pros of it have definitely outweighed any challenges and cons. And I wholeheartedly am very up for doing it again.